you grab me a tea or something?
And we are live, man. Let's get the share around music playing while we share it around.
Alrighty.
Better share it, buddy.
Yes, sir.
All right, man. Let's roll intro. And we are hot. Welcome, friends, fans. Ethan, Big Dogs, DAWJ. What's happening, Chuck Darby? What's up, old hound dog, says Calvin Denise. Or is it Dennis? I don't remember. Yeah. Hey, guys, before we dive in, pay attention to that intro banner. Those are the organizations that have chosen to partner with us and offer ABTA members certain discounts. If you're an ABTA member, be sure to go into the members section, and you will see a list of members benefits discount codes for everybody on that banner. There's a discount code available, and there's some good stuff there. Dan's Gear, Outdoor Dog Supply, or something. I think Conkeys has got one on there. People are using it and they're getting discounts, so be sure you take advantage of that. If you are a member, if you've joined and paid your membership dues and don't have access to the membership page yet, drop us a note. Probably drop Kenny a note. He can be sure that he can grant you access. I just want to make sure that nobody's missing out on the opportunities that these organizations are providing for ABTA members. So
yeah, man. Sometimes we grant access, but I don't know how it happens. I haven't figured it out yet, whether it's a glitch but somehow some people end up with multiple accounts. So we'll grant access under their account, not realizing they have 4 accounts in the system.
Yeah.
So just let us know if you have any issues and we'll get it straightened out.
Yeah. There you go. There you go. But yeah, Kenny, set the hook.
All righty. So, a lot of people brags about tailgates, tailgated deer, but what they don't talk about is how many dogs end up ruined trying to get there. So tonight we're cutting through the noise and setting the record straight. Really, because success in this game isn't just about what ends up in the truck bed.
Nope.
So, we're talking about success on the track and likely in training. But I'm sure it'll end up in training. So,
well, I got a whole thing on that when it comes to lines, but yeah, for sure. And I would tell you, as my idea of success in all things tracking has evolved as I've gained experience and my dog has gained experience, Although I think in kind of the core of today's discussion, talking about, like you said, it's bound to bleed into training. But the core of the discussion today, or at least conceptually, as we were, gaming this segment out, or this episode out, was success on the track.
Yes, and it was requested. It was requested. Oh, we lost Matt. We'll see if he comes back on. But what I was saying, this topic was requested by Randy Vick, and he has another one that we will be diving into later on. So I'll wait for Matt to come back on so we can dive right in. So I'll just kind of go over it while he's hopping back in, and we're going to have a few segments. We're going to talk about what is a successful track, what is an unsuccessful track, what constitutes a recovery or tailgated deer, what is considered accounted for, but we're going to talk about the find, and three ways that you can break a good dog by chasing success. So got some pretty good stuff going on. I'm going to mute for just a second, see if I can figure out what's going on with Matt. All right, so Matt said he is working on it for me to keep going. So I kind of wanted him on here, but we'll go ahead and talk about a couple of highlights. So I'm going to get them pulled up. We had a few private tests ran by looks like Michael Beck this past weekend, and looks like Mark Worrell and his Bassett Marcy passed the started level certification, and John Keslick, which I see he's on here. Luna, let's see, Tracking Partners Luna passed the season level test, and Sky passed the ABTA started level test. So I want to congratulate them. And we have Matt back.
Look who's back. Sorry about that, guys.
Yeah, so I filled the void talking about the private test with Michael Beck yesterday. And,
good. Yeah, good.
So yeah. I didn't want to dive into it without you on and to get your input on it too.
Okay, cool. Well, hope I'm back. Let's hope it's for the duration.
Yeah, so we'll dive right in. The first segment, the successful track. And, what is a successful track? It's when the dog worked honestly, the handler made the right call, and the outcome matched the evidence, even if the deer walks.
Yeah, there you go.
So success is doing the right thing, even when it ends with nothing in the bed of the truck. Maybe it's just your tracking lead and your pride that ends up in the truck. That's still success.
Yep.
Do you have anything you want to add to that, Matt?
Well, yeah, man. I mean, I call it track resolution. Is kind of the term I've come to use. Were you able to resolve the track with a reasonable amount of confidence based on the information and evidence available? We've talked about it a lot, and every tracking podcast out there talks about it. That some of the best dog work is done on non-recoveries.
Right.
So you can get an incredibly difficult track that ends on a deer you didn't recover. But if the dog can solve the problem with the dog, as I've stolen from you, can solve the track to some version, that is success. What more could you ask of that dog? But I like the way that you defined it by, were the right decisions made by the handler? Did the dog perform as expected, or to its capabilities? Did the hunter, were you able to provide some version of reasonable probability of what happened through, for the hunter, if it didn't end with a deer on the tailgate? Was the hunter satisfied with your effort, and were you in command? But not being in command doesn't mean being a jerk or abrasive. It just means were you in control and command? Did you look professional? All of that stuff to me factors in.
So what you're saying is the myth of recovery equals success.
Oh yeah, recovery.
It's a myth.
No. It's a myth. Recovery is one element that can be part of a successful track.
Right. So the truth, in essence, the truth is you can recover a deer and fail the track. You could also walk away empty-handed and win the whole thing.
Yeah. I mean, that's
just basically what you said.
Yeah. Yep. In a very concise way. I mean, I think if you ended up with a deer on the tailgate, the hunter's going to consider that a success, because that's really the only thing he cares about. But the challenge comes in, if you don't recover it, can that hunter feel like there was success? That therein lies the true measure of a good team.
So let me ask you this, Matt.
Yeah.
Does only the ending matter?
No.
So that's another myth.
Yeah.
So the truth is, if you train for endings, you'll skip the lessons. Dogs are built in the struggle, like we talked about, or we talk about it all the time. The dogs are built in the struggle. That's how you build a problem-solving dog. They're not built with the scoreboard.
That's right. Yeah. Take recovery percentages and flush them down the freaking toilet. That's why on my personal podcast, my Tales on Trails Deer Tracking podcast, that wasn't a plug, by the way. I'm just saying, when we talk about it, I do not allow the guests that I have on talk about recovery percentage. They can talk about the number of tracks they went on all day long. We're not talking about the recovery percentage, and we'll get into that as to why.
Right.
At some point here tonight, but it's just misleading and not the true measure.
So let's move on and talk about the unsuccessful track. I kind of jotted down a little definition. Yeah. So an unsuccessful track is any time the handler chooses ego, pressure, or ignorance over evidence, and the dog pays the price. So if you ignored what your dog told you and pushed through anyway, you failed the track, not the dog. Or did you?
Yeah, I mean, just you equate that to any tracking test. You know, the the handler fails the track test, not the dog, quite often.
Correct. Yep.
You know, the same thing applies to the real deal. Can
So,
apply, not always.
however, yes, the handler fails the track, not the dog. But at the same time, the handler fails the dog.
Yeah.
You
Yeah,
know,
but
when you start getting into dog psychology, which we've talked about a little bit here and there, you know, you start creating a dog that is going to second guess itself. You push a dog when it's telling you, you know, we're going to get this a little further, but the dog's telling you it's over, you know, the deer's going to live, and you keep pushing it, and you go and jump a healthy deer, whether it was wounded or not. Well, guess what you just created? A dog that wants to chase movement over scent.
yes, and I was talking with Ethan about this today, or somebody this week anyway. You know, I had to really work through um, tracks on live deer or shoulders, or because it when we would jump the deer when she was younger, it would promote the fun of the chase, and then that would bleed into, you know, it would carry over into challenges on the next track.
Yeah, and you know, here's the Lyle was texting me. Here's the a big one though that a lot of people doesn't think about. Some of the most damage done is the dog loses confidence and trust in you. That's something people doesn't talk about a lot.
No, you're absolutely right, and we've talked about that a little bit too, and even before I was joined the ABTA, we talked about it as is you know, not only are we learning our dogs, the dogs are learning us.
Yep.
And
we're a team.
We exactly, you know, weaving the fabric of that team. That's right.
Yeah. I'm trying to turn this off where it doesn't keep dinging. Yeah, so you can only ignore a dog's truth so many times before it stops talking to you. Eventually, you know, if Dixie comes back and she jumps up on me and tells me, "Hey, this deer's going to live. We're not going to get it," and I keep pushing her, Otto comes up and sits next to me and looks up at me and is like, you know, not wanting to move.
Yep.
And I keep ignoring that and I keep pushing them. You know, that they're going to quit telling me that, and I want them to tell me that. You know,
100%.
It saves me so much time.
Oh, absolutely.
It saves the hunter so much time. And the other side of it is I don't want a dog, and I have done this. I have pushed dogs and I've created dogs that run through the woods looking. They're looking for that deer to move or something to move to chase it.
Yeah.
You know, I've made those mistakes over the years. And by pushing the dogs.
Well, I mean, if you think about it too, it goes beyond. So you're creating a dog that's looking to chase movement. You know, that potential you just outlined it. But the more time you're in the woods, particularly in the dark, there is risk involved. You have a risk of getting a stick in the eye. You have the risk of your dog getting hurt. You have you know, if your dog is telling you it's over, and the dog is trained, knows its job, and you understand your dog, and all everything lines up, and you continue to push it, not only are you wasting time in creating false hope for the hunter, you're risking injury to yourself or your dog. I mean, it takes one roll of the ankle to put you as a handler out of commission for 2 weeks. It takes one stick in the eye to put your dog out of tracking forever. You know, I don't know.
Right.
So that's kind of an extreme, but it's also real. You know, so it's just another reason to be in tune, trust your dog with all when you know you should, and heed the message that the dog is sharing with you.
Right. So now let's get into the gritty. This is one of the main segments that Randy asked us to touch on was what is a recovery or a tailgated deer? So a recovery or tailgated deer, as I call it, many people calls it, is a mortally wounded deer that was located, confirmed dead, and oftentimes removed, more times than not, removed from the field.
Yeah.
If it is not located, confirmed dead, it should not be calculated as a recovery. And that's something he wanted brought up because many times people just consider locating the deer a find, especially in other aspects of deer recovery.
Well, and I know where you're going with that, but here's what I would say. If you locate the deer and it's still alive and you bump it and it runs off, and you can confirm somehow that it is the deer you're after, that's a find, but it's not a recovery. You found the deer.
Which gets into our next segment that we'll talk about.
Okay. All right. Yeah.
So, here's the real truth that a lot of people doesn't want to hear. A tailgated deer does not prove you're a good tracker. It proves the deer died. That's it. So when you get hung up on numbers of how many deer did you hunters especially or other trackers, well, how many deer did you find last year? That's not a measure of a good tracker.
No, I agree.
That's why how many dead deer they went on.
Yep, I agree. Again, another reason why I don't allow percentages to be talked about. I suppose you can talk about the number, but I don't even like to talk about the number of deer you recovered. For that reason.
There's value in the numbers.
There is.
Perspective, but there's too many variables that go into the number.
That's why they're misleading. They can be misleading. There comes a point where they may start to paint a picture. If you've been on 100 tracks and recovered 8 deer, okay. Statistically, that is the statistical probability of that happening, of all those deer not being dead, is pretty damn low. So you probably got something going on. But just because you are at the 30% instead of 42% doesn't mean anything.
No.
In terms of your skill and ability as a tracking team.
Yeah, not all recoveries are good tracks. I've seen some terrible dog and handler work on recoveries.
Well, of course.
A recovery done wrong is just training damage with a photo op. I mean, in all reality. And the same could go in the testing world. I mean, I've seen some dogs just check all the boxes that were just afterwards. I'm like, I don't even feel right passing this, but they check the box.
Yeah.
Same thing. I mean, I have personally recovered some deer that I made horrible decisions. The dog did some terrible sloppy work. And the hunting party stumbles up on the deer, and I'm gonna get a picture with it.
Oh yeah.
So again, misleading.
Yeah, I've done that before. I remember one on my second year. We tracked for somebody that we tracked for the previous year, and deer ran into a cornfield. I think I've told this story before. Deer turned left down the road. Brew kept going, and I was trusting my dog and Lottie Dottie and everybody. And off we go to the other county. And hunters come on, Matt, we got the deer right here. I was so disgusted. I wasn't gonna allow the dog to have credit for that find. I ultimately did. I took the picture. It was she missed a turn. I was on lead. I was confirming that that's what I wanted her to do by following her all the way. You know, it was we were close.
Here's why I still count some of those, because a lot of times they'd have never gotten the ballpark without the dog and handler work.
Absolutely. I mean, after I calmed down and got over pouting about it and how disgusted I was in my crappy dog, and it was really the crappy handler. You know, we took the picture. I did count it. It was legit, you know, but yeah, sloppy work by the handler. I'm going to call it inexperience by the dog, and the hunter stumbled on it anyway.
Yeah. So let's talk about accounted for. You know, accounted for, you reach a clear and defensible conclusion based on evidence, dead, alive, or unrecoverable. That's accounted for. So
say it again.
You reached a clear and defensible conclusion based on evidence, whether it's dead, alive, or unrecoverable.
Okay.
In other words, accountability is success. Still success, but it's not a recovered deer.
Right.
You know, not every deer gets recovered, but every track should end with the truth. And when it ends with the truth, it's accounted for.
To the best you can put together based on the information and evidence available. I agree.
Yeah. With clear and concise evidence.
Clear and concise. Yeah. Yeah. So there's so what you're saying is clear and concise, all that equals an accounted for deer. But there are circumstances then where you don't have enough pieces of the puzzle to come up with a confident accounted for deer. Is that where you're going? Like, man, I just don't know what I don't know. I can't have, you know, I've had those. Look, I can't explain this. I don't know what happened. You know, what you said, and then I don't have evidence. You know, all I know is I'm not able to find your deer. I've done that.
And it may come 2 months later when they send you a trail camera picture. Well, that point
exactly.
It's for.
100% right. Yep.
You know, the myth is you didn't try hard enough if you stopped without a recovery.
No.
Which ties right back into what we'll get into later, 3 ways you can ruin a dog.
Yeah.
The truth is, real grit is pushing harder. It isn't pushing harder. It's knowing when to stop.
Yeah.
That's the truth.
Yep. And that comes in time. We've talked about it before. You know, I'll say young handlers or newer handlers, it takes time to know when to stop. You know, you're still learning yourself. You want to do everything you can for the the hunter. I've done it before, you know, and I'll tell you what I'll do sometimes. If it's evident based on the dog's work and everything else that we're not going to recover this deer and it's relatively early in the track, you know, and the dog maybe quit tracking, give the signs, you know, rather than push her, I may say, well, let's just walk up over here, you know, and then we're just going for a walk around this swale hole on the downwind side. You know, I don't make her try to track, but I will go for a woods walk and see if she, you know, and that's more so for a, you know, the hunter effect than anything else. And I don't feel like that's pushing the dog. We're just going for a walk at that point, you know, like we've done 100 times in the off season.
So let's talk about, you know, on the dog side of things, you know, this is one where we can really get into, you know, a little bit of dog psychology here.
Yeah.
So what ends up happening here is you can either raise a dog that listens and thinks through its nose or with its nose, or a dog that listens to your desperation. One's a tracker, the other's a liability.
Okay. Like that, a liability. Okay.
I mean, if you raise and train a problem solving dog that can think through its nose, use its nose, and work the problems out, you're a tracker. If you train and develop a dog that wants to listen to your desperation and you pushing it and you not wanting to listen to the dog, you're a liability. You are going to leave deer in the woods. You are going to fail your dog. You're going to fail yourself.
100%. Yeah. Yeah. Now I want to go back though, because you said if you've trained the dog to solve the track, or however you put it just now, you're a tracker. I would have to take that just a half a step further to say, and you are in tune with your dog and can read its cues and know what the dog is doing. That makes you a tracker. Just
Right.
because your dog can solve problems and you're not in tune with it, and you're just there along for the ride, that means your dog knows what it's doing, but it doesn't mean you're a tracker. Because
Well, I would say it goes hand in hand because
yeah,
I don't think you can build a true problem solving dog without knowing the dog.
and I would agree with that. Yeah, because that's developed in the off season. That's developed right now. I would agree with that. But
It takes time behind the dog. It takes, studying your dog, studying your training lines, the
yeah,
good sexy and the bad sexy is
yeah, that's right, buddy. That's right. I'm a trendsetter. Good sexy, bad sexy. Come to the seminar next time. You'll hear all about it, followers. Yep. That's
so
true.
yeah. So just think about that. I mean, if you're one of these desperate people, and I've been there, especially early on in my tracking game, where I would do big wide Hail Mary loops and cast dog out this direction, cast dog out that direction when the dog's already told me it's not going to happen. I train that dog to work based on my desperation, and then I end up developing a dog that just wants to run around and cast and not have task discipline, as Ethan says.
Yeah, and I have I'm going to print that on a T-shirt. Task discipline, because that's all I give a damn about when I'm looking at training and training lines. Do I want her on top of the line? Kinda. Do I care? Absolutely not. I want her committed to the task. Yep.
Yeah. So let's talk about the find. So the dog locates the deer, but it may be alive, unrecoverable, or not ethically trackable. Still a find.
Yeah.
The dog locates the deer, whether it's alive, unrecoverable, or ethically not trackable. So a find is not a recovery. No. And treating it like one breaks more dogs than you think.
How so? Treating it like her.
So a lot of people thinks if the dog finds it, it's a win, and they encourage that. They encourage the dog to keep pursuing
non-mortally wounded deer.
Right.
Yeah. Rather than doing the Dixie jump up or the auto set and stare you hole in the side of your head or whatever. Yeah. Okay. I get it.
So again, the truth is, if you're encouraging your dog to pursue a deer that is not mortally wounded, at that point, you've crossed the line of hunting deer with dogs, and you're teaching a dog to try to chase and bay anything that moves.
Yeah. Yeah. And I, that's just not my tracking style. Maybe it works for some, but we're not that team. I don't have the dog for it. It's hard for us to do here. Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, and it gets into ethical situations.
Yeah, absolutely.
Or not unethical situations, I should say.
Oh yeah, it forces you then to wrestle with your integrity. You know what are you going to do now? You know, some states it's if you come, as I understand it, you come up on a deer that is alive and apparently non-lethal, the track is over. You cannot legally pursue it anymore.
Correct.
I think some of the upper eastern states, East Coast states, are like that. If I understand correctly, if I remember correctly, yeah, I agree.
And it's especially that way with drones in certain states. You know, you find the deer alive, and you used a drone in the aid to locate that deer, and you located it alive, and you go back and try to get that deer. At that point, you're pursuing game with the aid of a drone.
Yep. Yeah, that's right. Yeah, Vicky just confirmed it's illegal to pursue live game in Pennsylvania. So, yeah. I knew I heard that. I think there's more than one state out there, and probably throughout the nation that's the case. Michigan, that's not the case. You can, you can pursue it.
Yep, but keep in mind, a dead deer goes nowhere, like Ron says. Dead deer goes nowhere.
Yep. I want to track the dead deer. That's what I want to do.
Yeah.
Wait times are important. Now, one would think 19 hours is enough time. Turns out it ain't sometimes.
Oh yeah. But you need to know when to call that dog off and go back later.
Reset. Yeah, the deer. I mean, it was a good recovery. I mean, they had to dispatch it. The deer. Yeah. It was on his last leg, but it was still alive.
I told this story last year. Was it last year? It was either last year or the year. It was the year before. Anyways, within the last 2 years, I got called to a track, and we jumped the deer, and I kind of have a little rule of thumb on distance that I use, and the dog crossed that distance before baying it, and I toned her back. And before I did, I mean, when we were getting close, I told the hunter, I said, look, this deer is going to die. Mm-hmm. I don't want to push it off the property. I don't want to push it, into the next club where someone else will get it. And I don't want to extend that trail further where coyotes can cross the trail of a wounded deer, just right. Jumping odds of that. I said, so I'm calling the dog off, and we're going to come back in the morning. So I tone her back. I tone them back. And Dixie's a light-colored dog. So she gets back to me, and she's covered in blood.
Uh-oh.
And it was the deer's blood. So I told him, I said, we could stop this. I said, but, the deer still has a lot of life. It's already 10:30 at night. Let's come back in the morning. We went back in the morning, and it had circled back around, bedded up. I think it was 9 yards from where we jumped it the night before, and was expired in the bed. So we could have taken the chance to run that thing off of their property and went a long ways. Where I made the decision to because I kind of have that average distance that it takes to bay one. I've been able to use the data and make a good calculation on the average, called it off, and guess what? We didn't have to do anything. We walked in 200 yards where we jumped it, and I called it off, and there the deer had circled back, was 9 yards away instead of going over a mile.
Yeah. And that's one of the hardest things. Certainly for hunters is heating a wait time. And then for a tracker to particularly make that call to come back based on the circumstances, okay, especially when you're there, you have the tendency it's awful tempting to want to continue to pursue it when maybe you shouldn't. It's hard. Can I pull this question up, Christopher Shrewsbury questions, because it's in the moment right now. Let me pull this up. I don't want to necessarily get into comments, but I want to hit this one since it's in the moment. Kenny says, so how do you train your young dog to know when it is alive, or is that just something that you have to learn on live tracks and not mock tracks?
So you're going to learn your dog's mannerisms and characteristics on a mock track of basically how they're going to act on a dead deer. And you're going to see those mannerisms change when that deer is alive as they get closer. Some dogs will get vocal. Some dogs will just get antsy and want to run it, but you will, every dog's different, but you will learn it.
Yeah. I agree with that. And Chris, that happens on the line. I don't know how you train for that unless you're going to tie up a deer somewhere. Don't do that. But you'll see something. My dog, she'll start to get a little vocal. She gets really hot. If I'm on lead, she gets in 4-wheel drive freight train mode. It's pretty evident. But I have to tell you, early on, my first 2 years, particularly between my first and my second year, your dog is still developing tells. You are still learning your dog in that first and second year. And I made the big mistake. And I left the deer in the woods because she got vocal, and I thought that was her absolute tell that the deer's alive. Pulled the dog off. 2 days later, hey, I found my deer 50 yards from where we pulled out. She was just amped up because we were getting close to the deer.
Or was it alive at the time and you just didn't realize it?
Well, I questioned that. I think that may have that could have been the case too. But I think it was there. I think we could have kept going. But my point is, you gotta. It just takes time, and there'll be something.
So I just want to share a story, Matt, kind of like yours. And I've shared this before. Some of y'all may have heard it, some not. I got called to track a deer, and Dixie was young, and it was early in the season, and it was one of those tracks where I knew the deer was going to die. It was a high shot, far back intestinal hit, and there was no doubt in my mind it was going to die. But there was zero chance of us getting it that night, and we tracked it. It was one of those where the hunter, he was a young teenage boy. I say, yeah, he would probably 17, 18 years old. He didn't want to accept that. So I called Mike Alguire to come track in behind me. And I told Mike, the whole scenario, and he drove an hour and a half to basically give this guy some confirmation that I was correct. Well, I had pulled off just before the property line. And I told him, I said, look, if we keep pushing, this dog or this deer is going to go across the property line. The Mike comes in, and of course his dogs went the same direction as Dixie, and the boy immediately starts, oh yeah, the dog's just following the other dog, blah blah blah. Anyways, jumped the deer, ran it off the property, but called it very quickly. The deer went right across the road, and I told the boy, I said, look, this deer is going to die. I said, and we jumped it out of its bedding area. It's going to come back here. It's likely to come back here and die. It's just how it works. I said, so within the next few days, I'd come out here every day through the next few days and check. Well, the deer circled back, and so when we tracked it, the deer went down this old logging road and then made a 90 left, and we found blood that direction, and eventually that's the direction that the deer jumped. Well, the deer circled back and was 63 yards past where we 90'd. When it expired, they found it the next evening. Now, in that 17, 18-year-old boy's head, we missed the deer, that it went past the 90. But we had confirmation that we jumped that deer. There was blood in the bed. There was blood going across the road where we called it.
And your dog wanted to go across the road, right?
Right. Mine did, and Mike's. Well, and I stopped before we got to the road.
Yeah.
It bedded back down.
Yeah. Okay.
So just kind of letting you know, hey, sometimes they're going to die right there.
They do. I've got a story that's similar, only I blew this one too. We tracked a deer way too early. Dog tracked it like a machine. Out from 400 yards in, whatever it was, at the tip of a lake in the cattails, I subtly heard something get up. Dog goes a little bit hot. We pursued it for a little bit. I said, hey, man, I think we just jumped it. He couldn't come back the next day. I should have anyway because it was close to my house. 2 days later, Hunter's brother saw the deer laying 50 yards from the tree it was shot out of dead.
Yep.
Because it circled right back around and went right back to where it was shot. They do it. We talked about that on a stream, a couple weeks ago.
Yeah,
food plot deer.
Yep.
Oh yeah. So,
it happens. And while we're at this point, I kind of want to answer Michael Pritt's question. He said, "What made you think that deer was going to die? Was it gut shot?" Yes. It was gut shot, and we waited the just under the average time, but it had way more life than it should have even then.
What time of year was it? Was it rutting?
No.
Okay.
Well, it'd been close. Would have been close. Trying to think. Okay. Yeah, it was rifle season. It was rutting. Yes.
Okay.
So we waited. Like I said, we were just a little under. But here's the other thing. We're talking about that line between pursuing or hunting deer with dogs versus tracking wounded deer.
Yeah.
So two things that led to that decision. One is, I knew that deer still had a lot of life, and there's no doubt in my mind we could have ran it. We could have ran it down. It'd have been a long ways. Yeah. The other side of that is I read that person. I'm like, okay, he has law enforcement written all over him, and especially has the demeanor and look of a game warden.
Okay.
So when I read that, I told him, I said, hey, I'm going to call my dog off. I said, at some point I have to make an ethical decision. Are we hunting this deer with a dog, or are we recovering a wounded deer?
Yep.
And I said, that can get into some cross some lines or get into some gray area that I don't want to be in. Mm-hmm. And we can come back tomorrow morning. This deer will be dead. He said, well, I'm just going to go ahead and tell you. He said, I am a captain with the Florida Fish and Wildlife Commission, and I appreciate your decision. But if we want to get this, I mean,
okay.
I said, I'd rather wait till the morning. He said, me too.
Okay. Yeah. 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 You never know. You never know who you're tracking for.
No. So let's get into this one a little bit, Matt, if you don't mind.
Yeah. No, let's do it.
This is a critical segment here. Okay. 3 ways to break a good dog.
Yeah, I'm all ears.
One of them is keep pushing when they tell you the deer is alive, which we've already touched on.
Yep.
Number 2 is treat movement like success instead of scent truth. So
Hold on. Let me treat movement like success instead of scent truth.
yes.
Okay.
So, for example, and I knew that was going to get some people. Let me just go ahead and say the third one. Then I'll get into
Yep.
Reward chaos over clarity.
Yeah. Well, we'll need to dive into that one too.
Yep. Every time you force your dog to work a bad track, you vote against its instincts. Keep doing it and don't be surprised when they stop trusting you or themselves. So I just jotted down a few examples here. A dog overruns a turn, loops frantically, and the handler encourages it on a real track. I've seen this many, many times, especially tracking with other people, younger trackers that I'm mentoring. Instead of calmly circling back and restarting, the handler cheers the erratic behavior, thinking that the dog running frantically searching is a good thing. And it is working, but
it's not working with a purpose. I call that helter skelter. It's not working. It's not systematic problem solving. It's like, holy shit, it's gone. Where is it? And it's frantic, panicking. The dog is panicking.
Right. So the dog learns.
That's the time to insert yourself and say, okay, calm down. Let's go back here. Maybe do a downstay or something. Calm down. Here's a line. Work it out.
Right. And if you encourage that and you're, oh yeah, good boy, good girl, hunt it up. What you're teaching that dog, the way a dog thinks, is big energy equals approval, not stay thoughtful and solve the puzzle.
Yeah, 100%.
Another one. Oh, go ahead.
No, I say that just goes back to my sentiment. My personal sentiment is the more I talk to the dog, the worse it is. The only thing I can do, for the most part, if I'm talking, is screw her up.
Yep.
I don't, unless I got to call her back or something. I can only cause harm.
So another example is a dog false indicates or chases movement and gets hyped up for it. It sees a rabbit or jumps a non-lethal deer and the handler rewards the intensity. Now, you may not have seen it jump that rabbit, but it goes back to earlier talking about, big energy equals approval. You're thinking, oh yeah, we're going to go get this deer, especially in off-lead state. Oh yeah, we're going to get this deer. Go get him. And you're encouraging it. And now the dog thinks movement equals praise, not correct scent equals reward.
Yeah. Okay, there you go. Yep.
So another one, dog loses a line and starts casting wildly, which I used that example earlier.
Mm-hmm.
Handler keeps pressuring or calling it good. Good boy, hunt it up. Especially those Hail Mary, last cast, or the dog's not really hitting it. The dog's telling you, hey, there's no scent here, and you want to keep pushing. At that point, you're asking, or you're telling that dog to work in confusion.
Yep.
You're rewarding the action instead of recognizing the struggle. And the message to the dog becomes, when I'm lost, I should look busy and get loud because that gets results. That gets me praise.
Yeah. Yep.
It's you end up training a dog to rush instead of problem solve. Just run around and check, and especially the off lead guys. And I'm just saying this. It's because I've been there. I've done it. A lot of off leaders, they don't like to talk about line discipline or task discipline. I don't care if my dog follows the line. I don't care. Well, when you start having a dog that just, ranges out and tries to win, you're going to leave a lot of deer in the woods.
Yeah, I wholly agree. I mean, Yeah, I'm a task discipline guy, but I want it to be in relation to the line, not just casting about. I mean, I don't care if they stack, but the overlays, but
right. So, you're basically it's you get the dog that performs for the handler instead of following the scent, and the dog gets confused thinking adrenaline with accuracy, or he confuses adrenaline with accuracy.
Right.
You and the dog. So what do you want to reward? You want to reward when the dog settles into the track with purpose, rediscovers the line after a gap or a turn. Not that frantic. Don't reward the frantic action.
Right.
If the frantic action happens, keep your mouth shut, intervene when you need to, but you can give it some praise when it reacquires that line.
I agree.
If it shows a confident head snap or body change that signals, hey, I've got it, we all do it. I mean, oh man, look at that. Awesome. Good job. Good dog.
Good boy. Yep.
That head snap. When it solves that problem, that's a time to reward.
Yep.
Not during the problem solving process.
Totally agree with that.
Totally. You don't want to reward the dance. You want to reward the detective work. Otherwise you're training a performer, not a tracker. Do you want a ballerina out there, or do you want a tracker?
Right. Yeah.
So
yeah, I mean, all great analogies, and it does cause you pause, especially it causes you to reflect on what you're doing on your practice lines. Forget about the real track right now, because this is where you are developing your habits, and how you interact with your dog is on your practice lines. Are you constantly saying, find a good dog, get back to work, get to work, are you just keeping your mouth shut and watching the dog perform? I like that. A performance versus what was it? What did you say?
What was that?
What did you call it? A performance versus
a performer or a tracker?
A performer or a tracker? Yeah. You want it?
Yeah.
Right.
I don't want a ballerina. That's not what I originally put, but we'll stick with ballerina.
Yeah. Let's. I can imagine. Let's just stick with ballerina, buddy. Yeah. Pour some sugar on me would be the theme song, right?
Yep, you read between the lines. We got a problem solver over here.
Yeah, we do.
Yeah. So hopefully that answers some questions, because every year we see so many times, people, especially newer trackers, being confused by what's a successful track, what's an unsuccessful track, what is a recovery, what is accounted for, and what is a fine.
Yeah, I agree. Some of that's personal. Some of it might be, some of it could be considered subjective. But you really got to step back and look at it from a bigger picture, and just talk about the things that, think about it from the different perspectives, many of which we outlined here. What are you grinning at?
Calvin's comment.
Oh no. Which one?
Matt's tutu would come in handy then.
Oh my God, there it is. By the way, I don't know if you saw it, you goon, but Julie got some fantastic pictures. I'm going to start sharing some around. I want one of you smart people to do a really cool reel, because she got some great pictures, and one of them is you laughing your ass off at that tutu picture with me.
Oh, she caught a good moment there.
Oh, she did. It was awesome. And Calvin, you are now removed from my Christmas card list, buddy.
I'll send you a Christmas card, Calvin. That one right there is worth it. I don't
Dancer, knowing Kenny and Brandy Mullins like I do, says Darby on the Dancer. Yeah, we know, Chuck. We know. Let's roll up. We got some good long comments here. Let's snag a couple.
Yeah, let's hit them.
And I'm not reading these in advance, so I don't know what we're going to get. Darby, this is like when you tell the hunter what the dog is going to do if the deer is going to live to see another day. Well, yeah, and that we've talked about ad nauseum, but always worth talking about again is in the pre-track briefing. Explaining to the hunter what to expect in the various situations in terms of dog behavior and things like that. That certainly lends credibility to you. It adds to the professionalism, and it helps them understand, know that it's time to call this track or whatever. So yeah, I agree, Chuck. You can also push, Perry. Yeah, you can also push a dog when the dog tells you it's over. Yeah. Particularly young, newer handlers that are still learning it. It was
skip all the way down to the bottom because we got a comment going, a couple of comments going here. The very last one. I know I'm getting you out of order, but I want to touch on.
No, that's all right.
Dave Medora.
Dave, my buddy Dave. Yep.
Yeah, it says, can a dead deer left in the woods ever be considered a success? Example, a gut shot deer is dead, but you can't turn it up, but you put in hours of work. Yes. Yes, it can be considered a success. Can it be considered a recovery? No. So that goes back to what's the definition? And again, this is my definition, but it's pretty solid. Definition of a successful track is when the dog worked honestly, the handler made the right call, and the outcome matched the evidence, even if the deer walks.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, how there's the whole property line issues.
Right.
You get the property you can't cross, but your dog led you there and evidence proof that was a successful track. So yeah, I agree. Can you consider it be considered a success? Example, if a gut shot deer is dead but can't turn up. Yeah, I guess it depends on all the rest of the elements.
If the dog worked honestly and the handler made the right calls and the outcome matched the evidence.
Yeah.
There's some factors in there, property lines, what happened. What is it legitimately gut shot or is it intestinal? That's
Gene Ferris disagrees with that, and that's okay.
I think that's because people they get confused. Successful track versus a recovery versus accounted for. There's a lot of confusion there, and that's why Randy Vick asked us to do this segment.
Yeah, well, and for Gene standards, in the way he's approaching it, that would not be considered a success to him. So, and I guess that's okay. And that's a great question, Dave. And because I think the natural instinct on the surface, the visceral response is, nope, that was a failure. But not necessarily, man, because what other factors were involved, and
that's where I was going. Now, it could be considered unsuccessful because of the fact that it says, that you couldn't turn it up. Well, it depends on the factors. It could go either way. So that's why I was saying, yes, it can be, but it's not a recovery.
So, okay, so Gene, and this is okay. This is a great discussion. We're going to disagree on successful track, I believe. I always thought success is achieving what you set out to do. Gene, you know what? That to me, all of this is a general conversation. and you are going to have to set your own standards, and you will have to set your own definition of success. And to you, that is not successful based on your definition, then there you have it. And there's no shame in that game. I mean,
well, that goes back to the people thinking that recovery equals success. And statistically, not every track you go on is a recovery. So are you saying that you're not successful, that you don't have a successful track if you don't recover a deer? Well, what about all that great dog work that happens when there's not a recovery?
Yeah. Yeah. And like I said, I tend to align that a successful track doesn't necessarily mean a deer on the tailgate by any means. Is a deer on a tailgate successful? By and large, I'd say, yeah, you got there, but then there's what we talked about. How messy was it? Was it happenstance, or was it truly the efforts of the tracking team, the dog and the handler that got there? So
I mean, I see where Gene's coming from, and it's just a different measure of success.
Different measure of success.
And I'm not saying John wrong. Don't get me wrong. I'm not saying Gene's wrong, but his measure of success is different than what I feel a measure of success is, because I'm looking for good dog and handler work as being successful. If you did everything you could do, and you did it right, and you again, you did it honestly, you made the right calls, and the outcome matched the evidence, I would say it's successful. But it could go either way in that scenario without knowing what happened.
I want to pull up something here. And at one time I had it on my wall down here. I don't anymore. Hold on. So we've talked about this a million times. Okay, yeah. Calvin says go back to his previous comment. But I just want to pull this up. We're on talking about the definition of success, and we all know, or some of you may remember, that I am a massive, massive John Wooden fan. If you don't know who John Wooden is, please, please, please do yourself a favor and look him up. He's a legendary UCLA basketball coach, and his accomplishments will never be duplicated. I have the highest admiration for John Wooden, and I modeled much of my coaching. It took a long time to come up with a definition of success, and I just want to read that since we're talking about success. Okay. Coach Wooden's definition of success is: success is peace of mind, which is a direct result of self-satisfaction in knowing you made the effort to become the best of which you are capable.
Yep.
So peace of mind. If you don't have peace of mind that you did the best of which you are capable, then maybe that's not success. You left something out there. You left something on the table if you don't have the peace of mind and knowing that you did the best that you are capable. And nobody can expect you to do more than what you are capable of.
Right. And which is why I said it could go either way. I mean, because if you went out there and you and the dog, worked honestly, you worked hard, and the handler made the right call, the dog made the right decisions, did all it could do, and the outcome matched the evidence, it's successful.
Yeah. Let's read Calvin's comment, since he forced me to, like the bully that he is. Reflection is a huge part of success, in my opinion. Being able to realize what you had happened. Let me see. Being able to realize what you had happened well on a track, and knowing what your weakness was on a track will only make you a better team. Reflection will allow you to see the whole picture for forward progression. We all too often get tied up in the motions of of the hunter knowing all too well it's most likely non-recoverable deer, leaving out the success of the work that was put into that point on a track. Yes, and Calvin, we banter, but that was well said.
Yeah, And again, I'm not saying that Gene's wrong. He just has a different measure of success, and that's okay.
Yeah, that is okay. Yep. And to that point,
John Bond said, if you and your dog pour hard out on the track, you did all you can do.
Yep. Yeah,
that example I get, and I shared this one again. I know people's probably going to get tired of hearing it, but last year, I don't even know if it was last year. Anyways, it was last year. When I went on a track and we jumped the deer, and my dogs were toast. It was hot. We tracked a long ways, and I called off. And I called John. I said, hey, man, I need some fresh dogs. I need some help. I consider that a successful track. Did my dog stop that deer and put that deer on the tailgate right then? No. Because I made the decision to pull them off because I knew that I was fixing to burn them up.
Yep.
But it was a successful track because my dogs worked their tails off, worked through some unreal conditions of literally chest deep water, got to the deer. I did my part as a handler of putting the dogs in the right place, trusting the dog, knowing that they were right. I made the right call to pull them off. That's a successful track.
Yeah, I agree. And you said something there that made
deer, by the way, but
say again, what?
So we did get the deer.
You did get the deer, yeah, but it was a successful track. So, telling that story made me think of something that I use a lot, and we haven't used this language for quite a while, but advancing the track. Were you able to advance the track beyond the hunter's point of loss? Sometimes when you can't do that, that's because where the scent changed, right? The pheromone, the declining health pheromone or the health status pheromone stopped emitting, and it smelled like every other deer. Maybe it was the bed at 300 yards where it laid for 3 hours and calmed down, or maybe you do advance it for another 300 yards beyond the hunter's point of loss, but it's a non-recovery. Is that a successful track? You advance the line. I tend to think so, barring other potential circumstances that might render it unsuccessful. But, did you advance the line? I always look at that. Was I able to advance this line? And then was I able to advance it in terms of probable advancement based on dog's demeanor, or was I able to confirm advancement with blood or some other type of confirmed sign? That's what we always like to see. But a lot of times, you advance that line even though you can't confirm it with a speck of blood, but you know what your dog is doing.
Right.
So that, to me, that's a factor. Did you advance the line?
So I do want to say, so you can see there's different measures of success and unsuccessful track, but I think the two that get confused the most or three: a find, a recovery, and accounted for.
Yeah.
Those are the three that get intertwined into statistics that people use to promote themselves in a false manner.
Yeah.
Whether it's intentional or not. Because sometimes they just don't know.
Right.
Especially in the drone world, if they find it, they consider it a recovery. Many of them. Not all of them, many of them. That's why you see 98%.
Because yep. And I will tell you, in the drone world, I would be okay if they advertise that 98% in the right framing. If the numbers are true and they're saying, look, we can locate 98% of the deer we search for. Okay. That doesn't mean that only means 40% of them were really dead and were able to be put on a tailgate, maybe. But you could locate, the back whack, the high shoulder, you blew his tail off, whatever, I don't know. If they frame it right, maybe I'm okay with that.
Yeah.
With them saying that percentage. Which one you want?
Gene Ferris's last comment. He says, "We push them not for our numbers, but to push them to do better. No different mock tracks in their levels. Success comes from completing your goal, and our goal is to recover every deer. But realistically, you cannot recover every deer. So does that mean you don't have successful dogs? So that's my question. What happens if that gut shot hit a property line? You're not going to be able to recover that deer. Does that mean your dog was unsuccessful? So just something to ponder on, Gene.
Yeah. Yep. Again, not being critical at all, Gene. But I'm not going to let you get away with the fact that you or your dogs aren't doing good work on deer you don't put on the tailgate, because you are. Maybe you're not going to call it successful, but I'm going to tell you you're doing good work. So I'm not going to let I'm giving you that. It means they and I failed.
No, and that's where you're wrong, Gene. You're being too hard on yourself and your dogs, because if they did the work and they got to where they could go, that's successful. If they trailed that deer to the property line, you had to pull them off, that's a successful track. Is it a recovery? No, but you didn't fail. You did your job.
Yeah. Gene, I don't know you, buddy. I know you comment a lot, but I tend to agree with you. Don't be too hard on yourself, man. This is a humbling game, just like Slifer says up here.
Yeah, I mean, you
don't
can't control every circumstance. That doesn't mean your dogs aren't successful.
Yep. Again, not being argumentative, Gene, at all.
No. I'm trying to boost them up on that one, because
me too. I do. Yeah. Let's grab Frank here.
Yeah.
So when the dog is searching quickly, almost running for the scent after overshooting a 90, or quickly bracketing when trying to reacquire the line, what do you suggest doing to slow them down? I haven't been saying anything to my dog. I'm just letting her work it out. Is that the wrong approach?
It all depends. There's a fine, I shouldn't say fine, there's a line there of when to step in and when not to step in. And you just got to know your dog. I mean, if your dog is, you don't want your dog to exert so much energy and to the point that they give up in trying to find it. So let them search, but start paying attention, because they'll show you signs of starting to slow down and getting frustrated. That's the time to step in, reattach them to the line where they were on it beforehand, and let them try to work through it.
And I also gauge it by, okay, what does the problem solving look like? Are the circles getting bigger, to where they're eventually going to cut the line? Are they gradually working themselves closer to the line, or is it just helter-skelter all over hell? Now, Frank, I mean, you send us your Garmin, you can tell by the Garmin that Mika her work is purposeful. At least it is. I can tell by the Garmin overlay the work is purposeful, But yeah, I agree with Kenny. You got to kind of gauge it. As long as the work is purposeful and it's not helter-skelter, and it looks like
she's going to hit it, then it's good. It's good work. I mean, and some of it is breed. That breed just tends to be a little.
They panic. They panic when they lose it.
They panic a little bit, but they're just their nature is to. I don't know. Except for Tom's Kirby. Good Lord,
some of them.
Yeah. Tom, I don't know if you're listening, but Kirby was a pleasure to be behind. But holy crap, moly, he was. Whoo! He could use that bee that stung Baru on her finish test. It was funny.
I know you were pulling up Ron's earlier when I kind of.
Yeah, I'm trying. I think it's down here. Where is it? Where is it?
It may have been the one you already referenced.
You talk about panicking. I'm panicking trying to find Ron's comment now. Right here. Always humble, though. It's best to stay humble. Tracking deer has a way to knock you down when you get high on your horse. Boy, ain't that the truth. Always humble. You can be proud. You can be damn proud, but you can also be humble. It's funny because I had that conversation with Daryl today. He took Mela, his pup, out on a line last night, and she did, and he videotaped it, and it was really good work for her age. And he was like, "Man, I'm going to enjoy this one because I know reality is going to come calling, and it's going to fall apart at some point." I go, "Yep." But absolutely enjoy that one because that's a nice validation that she does know her job and can do the work. Come back up here, scroll down. You got what you like?
Yeah, there's a few up there.
Tell me which ones.
I'm going back up. So I seen some earlier. Did you get Shannon Blocker's The Truth Is?
I started to pull that one up. All right, here. Go ahead. Go ahead.
The truth is we're not going to find them all, but being a good handler determines the end of the track. Because if you as a handler see and watch and know your dogs are not doing right for whatever many of reasons, sucking up pride and calling a buddy to come and check, but not a drone to come find it, and then I turn dogs out, that's just wrong.
What now? But not drone to come. And then, okay, yeah. Yep. Gene said, when you quit on a dog, the dog will quit on you. Maybe I pulled that up already. Yeah, and we've talked about that before too. Yeah, I agree, Gene.
Yeah, and Kristen Howard further down says dog and handlers get to have an off day. I've disgusted with myself and my dogs only to find out they were right, just having a bad day. Yeah, and it happens.
And I've thought about the dogs having a bad day. And I wish I was a dog psychologist because dogs, unless they're trying to steal something off the counter or get into the trash, they're not deceptive by nature.
No, but fatigue.
What's that?
Fatigue plays
yeah. So they could be fatigued. So I guess my point is, if the dog's having a bad day, I tend to lean towards there's something else impacting it, whether it's fatigue, whether it's some type of weather element, some type of.
Well, we're the same way, Matt.
Yeah,
we're fatigued. We can be grumpy. We could make bad decisions if if we're not feeling good, if we're sore.
Yeah, and I guess that's what I mean. Yeah, I guess that's what I mean. So yeah, you're right. So that could constitute a bad day. Calvin,
Gene has one just below Calvin's right there that I want to touch on.
Yep.
If you or the hunter stumble up on the deer, it's not a find. I personally turned loose on a deer. Dog went on point, so we drove around because the briars were so thick. We never seen the deer. Called another dog. I called another dog in, and it stopped at the same spot. Still, we can't see the deer. When they burned the land off, the deer skeleton was there. The dogs didn't fail, but we as handlers failed. I agree. However, I will say there are times where we stumble up on deer because the dogs get to the end and they're trying to work out a scent pool, and they're working their tails off to try to work out that scent pool, and we just happen to walk up on it while the dogs are working that area. I would consider that a fine because the dogs got you there.
100%. I absolutely would too, particularly when they're in the scent pool. The dog got you there. You just happen to see it first.
I know that's a little different than his scenario there. I would not consider that a fine.
I would not consider that a recovery.
I'm sorry, a recovery. Yes, a recovery. I would not consider that a recovery. No.
I think they found it. They just didn't know it. I think the dogs found it, and you didn't know it at the time. But it wasn't a recovery. I had one last year where the dog tracked it like a machine. It was, another one of those 1,300-yard tracks, 1,000-yard something. She worked it out. It was beautiful. And just before we found it, the dog found it. Here come the hunter. I was with his grandson. The hunter went back and, unbeknownst to me, drove to this cornfield and was just walking around to see if it went into the corn. And as he was walking back to us, and we were just inside the woods, he saw the deer. And I go, he says, "Have you found it?" I said, "No." And then I could kind of peek through and see it laying there. I said, "Well, just let the dog find it." That was a find. I took it. The dog got us there, even though the hunter stumbled upon it. We tracked it that 1,300 freaking yards. That was a recovery.
So Chuck Darby asked me a question. So, what is the distance in which you tone them back?
Yeah, I saw that. Yep.
So, this is my dogs in my area, and could be terrain dependent, but for an average, if from the time that the dogs jump the deer, this is off lead with my cur dogs. If the dogs jump the deer and they don't bay it, typically within 750 yards at least once, we either don't get it or we end up pushing it a long, long ways. And I just found that that's a good average distance for our team to make the decision to call off and come back, or at least call them back and go investigate, and make a decision from there. But it's 750 yards from the jump.
Okay, 750. If they're not bayed within 750 of the jump, you're calling them back and reassessing.
Yes.
Yep.
I'm not saying I don't always continue to pursue, but we're going to make a decision. We're going to start assessing things and make a decision, because then you start running into property line issues. There's strategy there, but they don't stop at 750 yards from the jump. I'm calling them back, and we're going to analyze things and make a decision from there.
Yep. Let's grab Marks. Maniaci. Used to in Missouri, you couldn't pursue after the jump deer. Law changed 2 years ago. Now we can pursue. Makes sense that you are saying, but we have caught up to shoulder shots standing 10 foot away for a follow-up. So you're saying this will promote the dog to chase non-fatally shot game? ? Maybe these deer would have died in following days on lead.
So misunderstood what I was saying. When you can confirm that deer is not mortally wounded, and you encourage it to keep chasing, that's what I'm talking about. Now, if you're on lead and you're getting up to a shoulder shot deer, that deer is fatally wounded.
Yeah, I agree with that. And if you can get to the deer, and maybe it takes you a couple times, but you're catching up to it on lead or off, I would continue to pursue that for that dispatch shot.
Yeah,
but
I'm talking encouraging them to run a healthy deer.
Yeah,
yeah.
When the dog's not baying it, or when
the dog's telling you, "Hey, we're not, this deer is going to live," and you keep pushing it. Now you're encouraging that behavior.
Yeah, right. Yeah, that's right. When the dog tells you it's game over, but you keep, yep.
Hopefully that makes sense.
Yeah, I hope that clarifies, Mark. But in your situation, I'd keep going, man.
Yeah, absolutely. 100%.
As long as you have the property, absolutely.
Perry asked what I base my decision on, or the distance on. That's where the statistics and data come into play. When I start looking at what percentage of deer do we actually stop or put on a tailgate after that distance, and that's what I base it on. So when 5% of my recoveries come from further than 750 yards after the jump, I start making a decision.
Yeah.
So that's why I set that number. Like I said, that doesn't mean I'm not going to go further. That's going to be the point where I'm going to stop and analyze everything and make a decision what we're going to do. Are we going to wait till the next morning? Or are we going to continue to pursue? Or are we just going to call it quits altogether?
Yep. Let's grab Brian. I'm waiting to see what my young hula does, Catahoula, when he gets to the end of a track and there's a half live deer there instead of a piece of hide. Well, hopefully, Brian, you get to a whole dead deer first couple of times, but yeah. And then Chuck says, "Don't be surprised if he's a little skittish." I know my bloodhound. That's obviously the bloodhound thing. She don't like live deer. She'll stay away from them, hang out with them if they don't leave. She doesn't mind chasing one a little bit if it runs, but if it don't run, she won't do a thing.
Your cur dog go with that bloodhound.
I'm telling you. Yeah. Yep. Let's see. What other comments? We already hit Frank. Got Dave.
There was a good one about on lead versus off lead recovery rates.
Okay.
Trying to find it. Okay, John Kesslick. Tracking true to the line is important for off lead dogs, but then wouldn't on and off lead recovery rates be the same, or off lead dogs just have higher recovery rates because some of the dogs can bay? So here's some more common myths, and I'm glad you asked this question. First off, I'm not real big on the dog staying completely true to the line, because where is that line? The scent may not be where you see that trail or those tracks. You may have some scent drift. So I like them to be true to the task. With that said, let's talk about recovery rates and the reason why. Does bay and catch play a factor? Yes. I will tell you that factor is not as large as people often thinks. The bigger factor is taking the dope off of the end of the rope and the dog being able to problem solve without you getting in the way.
Yeah.
That's the biggest factor.
That's what I think too. I mean, we've talked about it 100 times. It is absolutely game changing and liberating. And again, you can practice that way if you have recall, even though maybe you can't track that way. If you get recall, you can practice that way. But I agree.
And when I hear people say, "Oh well, 60% of my deer are alive when I get to them," then I start questioning your wait times, and I can do that because I've been there and I know.
Yeah.
When I started extending my wait times out, I went from 60% of the deer being alive and being bait or caught down to about 10%.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, and
The,
on
old,
lead,
the older you get, the more you'll want to track the dead deer, not live deer.
statistically on lead, 60% of the time, you're not putting that deer on the tailgate like we talked about, for all of the reasons, and probably the lion's share of those reasons are the deer aren't dead when you were there. Probably the next one is property stops. And I'm guessing, but yeah. By the way, congratulations on your certification this weekend, John. I know Kenny just said that at the top of the episode here. Here's one, Kenny. Michael Pitts Jr. Say there is a deer that is shot and is recoverable. Is there every point that the hunter has ruined their chance of recovery due to his actions?
Absolutely.
It was exactly the word I was going to use, but I wanted to see what you said. You know what I've said, and I've kind of moved away from this this little phrase, but I said there are three big things that impact the ability to recover a deer. Two of them are controlled by the hunter, and none of them are controlled by the tracker. Now I backed away from that because I used to say that, and it was, the hunter's shot placement, the hunter's actions after the shot, how soon he pursued, and weather conditions is what I used to say. Those are three of the biggest factors, and I think the hunter's actions are still one of the biggest factors, and it's pursuing too soon. We all know, and the minute that the hunter sees blood, it's over.
Yeah.
Because that old crimson seductress, as I call her, just seduces him to just come this way, just keep coming. So,
Yeah.
And then the grid search, and then they start pushing deer that are liver shot, bedded down 300 yards away, and now all of a sudden it's 800 yards away, 2 properties over.
Yep. I tracked a double lung that should have been dead in 100 yards, and the hunter got down literally right away, went running up there to it, and it jumped in the river.
Oops. Yeah. Great time. Let's see here. Mark says again, nobody likes leaving dead deer. Did you try your best? Yes. Learn from it and move on. No, I bet you're going to work harder next time. And that is actually, Mark, and I'm glad you brought it up, and it's been commented a couple of times here. So, if you can learn something on a track that doesn't end in a recovery, and it was a handler error, like I've made plenty of, and I reflect on and learn from it, then you're developing. You're getting better as a handler, which is making your team better. And but to Calvin's point, you've got to reflect. You've got to be open to that self-reflection and not let that ego defense get in your way. It's hard to do, particularly for men. It's really hard to do. But if you really want to grow and evolve, you have to do it. And if just don't fool yourself. So yeah, man, I agree. If you've learned something, there is a version of success. Let's see what old Chuck's got to say for himself. I had a guy last year call me the next morning after a track and tell me that he owed me an apology. He said, I thought that you missed last night. 2 hours after you left, the deer showed back up to the feeder and fed for a few hours and no visible wound. I told him that the deer wasn't hurt bad because the dog wouldn't take the line and he wasn't hearing it. And that's the hard part, man. They always think they hit it. They always think they smoked it. Our minds are a powerful thing, man. We create the image that we want to see. Well, what does Mike say? Mike Alguar, I had one last year. We tracked for over two hours. I told the hunter, let's let him lay until morning and I will come back. I told him the dogs are acting like this deer is far from dead or being dead. I told him it would be great. It'd be a great idea to sit in the same stand in the morning. There's a good chance he's going to come back down this trail he went in on to get back to his bedding area. He called me a little after 7:30 the next morning. He was able to get another shot on him. The first shot, I didn't get it all, but yeah. Cal Tolbert in terms of the callback. I don't think necessarily in terms of the 750 rule, but if the deer crossed a few creeks after we jumped it and never checked up, then the odds would go way down. Obviously, the farther they go, the lower the odds. I try to give the deer an opportunity to get to a creek or a pond to bay in before I tow them back if possible. Okay.
Well, we have a pond every 100 yards. Most of our tracks are in need of waist deep water the whole way, anyways.
Well, it seems like every freaking track you talk about chest deep water.
Yeah, ask Mike Alguire about my hunting club. That whole area, all the clubs around here. Whew. Perry Lawrence, remember the floating hat story?
Yeah.
That was 10 minutes from my house.
Here's Mike again. I think this is when we was talking about what my dog does. He said, I need a cur dog.
Yeah.
His dogo to go. He's got a dogo to go with his bloodhounds for that exact reason. They don't fool with live deer, but he has boosted their confidence. So now if he catches, they will as well. But as a handler, even with a great catch dog, I do everything in my power to make sure we find dead deer with proper wait time. Yeah, I think that's the honorable thing to do, if the honorable is the right word. But yeah, old Dogo taught that old floppy bloodhound how to catch. I don't want my bloodhound catching. I just don't.
Yeah. No, you need that cur dog.
I need that cur dog. I like that. I like the looks of a cur dog.
Baxter out there to catch.
Yeah, old Baxter, he would too. That little snot. God, anybody. Brian, okay, here we go. Let's do a little bit of our own bugle tooting, or we'll let Brian do bugle tooting for us. Brian Weissong. Hey, y'all, I've had an ear on the podcast and learning an astronomical amount with our noses on the trail. Just want to give you a shout out, Iowa Blood Trackers Association. It's legit. Join now. Help our growing group of trackers, the Iowa Blood Trackers Association Facebook. Huge thanks to all that made this happen. Well, thanks, Brian.
Yeah, that's good stuff. They're headed in the right direction. They've made some big moves since last year when we were up there even. And I was recently able to help them with some legal documents that they were they were needing for their association. And Brian, I will be joining. Obviously, I don't track there, but I will support the cause.
Mike, I don't know. Good Lord, yeah, there's a video of me swimming in one of the ponds, Kenny. It was cold that night. I don't want to track in Florida. You snakes.
Hey, I'm going to go ahead and tell you, I got that call, and I said, I'm not available, but Mike is.
Yeah. Oh, you're that guy. Oh, this is a shitty one. Hey, call Mike. Yeah. So,
hey,
Mike, you're
I want to track you, Mike, buddy. So I gave him one.
That's funny. I don't know. Let's see what old Zach's got to say. You guys love listening to the show every week. Quick question on our Teckle. He is a year old now. He tends to blow by 90s. He wants to work super fast. Just wanting to hear some ideas to try to get him to slow down a little on track without taking that drive away. By the way, it was nice meeting you in the Crest Haven area in Illinois, Matt. Well, thanks, Zach. Yeah, it was. Now I got to pull up your profile. I'm sure I'll remember you when I see your picture. But
so I have a lot of questions that would dive into that, and honestly, Zach, it would probably be best if you shoot me a message where we can discuss in more detail. I'd like to know, what the lay times are, the methods that you're using to lay the track, some of the techniques you've done already to try to work through that. There's a lot that can go into that. It's hard to answer without those details.
Yeah.
So just shoot me a message. I'm definitely willing to help.
Yeah, for sure, Zach. Thanks for the question, though, buddy. And by the way, I think your question. Talk to Frank too. Frank is working through stuff with Mika, who's a little bit older than yours, but Frank's been working hard and looking at Frank's overlays. I don't think he has as big a problem as it seems like he thinks he has.
I will say this, just based off of those details right there. I'm wondering. I'm curious as to whether you're aging the tracks long enough and challenging the dog enough, and also if you have allowed the dog the opportunity earlier in training to work through the problem, or if you gave it a win. So those are some questions I have, and why I was asking the questions I was, but I'll help you out with it.
Yep. Yeah, Kenny and Mike and I sent you a couple of those setups as well.
What's that?
So Mike acknowledges, in all fairness, I sent Kenny a couple as well.
A couple?
All right. Well, appreciate you adding you on Facebook. Thanks, guys. All right, Zach. Cool. Good deal, man.
Oh, we're losing you, Matt.
Walk through the meat of the comments, and I'll scan them again. But you recap some of the key takeaways from tonight's discussion.
So, basically, I think it can all be wrapped up in this right here. Dogs don't care about a tailgate photo. We do.
Yeah.
Our ego does. Our marketing does. They care about the truth. And if you want to build a real dog, a dog that will trust you, a dog that'll go through the fire for you, you better start listening before you start leading.
Yeah.
I think that pretty much sums it up. Don't get caught up in the numbers. Get caught up in your dog.
Yeah. Comparison is a thief of joy. For new handlers listening, I am a victim of that classic statement. My first year, I wanted to be like the 5-year-old, 5-year veterans. I wanted my 1-year-old dog to do the work of a 5-year-old dog. I didn't have the patience for it. And my comparison, robbed me of the joy of the process. And the process is wonderful and fun. Stay disciplined to it, understand what it is, become a student of our game, and only strive to be the best that you can be, never better than anybody else. It will come. Success travels in the company of hard work.
Yep. I just try to be better than I was last year.
Yep. All right. Well, guys, I think we're there. Crowding the 2-hour mark as usual. As per usual, guys, thanks for the comments, the input, the participation, the sharing, and the loyalty in listening. And Brian Wysong, I like to know some pros and cons of these podcasts on dogs next. It's something that is on our list, Brian. We just
there's no cons, Brian. No cons.
With that, we will call the night, guys. Thanks a lot for listening. Till Tuesday, guys. More of the good, less of the bad. Talk to you soon.